Welcome to the Accountable Intelligence Podcast.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sean Pretty Boy Floyd and Lucas Truex here for Accountable Intelligence. Back for another episode and trying to get everyone involved and keep everybody informed as much as we can, at our level on the ins and outs and the possible repercussions of staying, ignorant of what AI and what effects AI is having on our society.
We talked a little bit about what we wanted to go over this episode. I think a couple things that stand out. One is, what is the current news in the AI industry? Because it's moving so fast. It's crazy how quickly research advances, etc. But also the data center and data centers regulation. And now even we're seeing that the mobilization against those is kind of rapidly forming. So we'll focus updates in most of those areas we just discussed. And I think a pulse check first. Up to this point, I'm not aware of any real regulation that says, okay, AI can do this or can't do that. I mean, there's really nothing out there, at least not in the United States, that says we prohibit AI from doing this or slow down the research so they have these types of checks. We're just moving so fast with absolutely zero limitations on what can be built. New this week from Governor Greg Abbott is they're talking about now introducing, at least on the data center side, some very specific, and I won't say stringent, but at least some rules to govern how these data centers are deployed, what impacts they can have on communities, which for Texas and the model that has been followed thus far, which is as fast as you can build, as many as you can build, we'll take them all. That's a huge change in tone. That has to be because there's been political backlash.
There you go, man. There you go. Let's hope there's some teeth behind that too, man. Like you speak of political backlash. Let's hope it's not just lip service to calm people's nerves. Let's hope they're truly dedicated to at least looking into some regulations and some guardrails with those data centers. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A couple of things that stand out from the Texas legislation are topics that we've talked about previously: the water consumption, the power consumption, and of course these data centers require all kinds of cooling, all kinds of power. But there was a really wide set of power and water needs, depending on how mature the solutions were. But the government wasn't requiring anything. So, for example, you could say, hey, I need 50 million gallons a day for this data center. And there was no regulation to point to say, okay, you need 50 million for this much compute versus this other person who needs 1 million for the same amount of compute. Which one should we prioritize? So Texas is at least introducing some we'll say rules around, you essentially charge up the data centers. They suck water in for the cooling systems, and then that water is recycled through, and there is a little bit of water loss, obviously, each cycle, but primarily you're going to reuse a lot of the water that's there. So again, something else that Texas is looking at regulating and requiring that you have to use a closed-loop water system, which, as we're talking about this, it seems like, how have we not had this the whole time, right? Why in the world would we not say,
I had no idea, man. I assumed they were all closed loop. That's news to me, man.
That's right. Yeah. So this would literally be the first regulation requiring any type of like efficient power system and efficient water system that I'm aware of, especially in Texas, but maybe in the United States. And I think New York just passed some regulations very recently, so those might have some competing regs there. But as far as I know, these last couple of weeks have really introduced some real legislation. Here's the downside. This doesn't go into effect until 2027. There's a lot of 2026 left, and I think there are something like 200 data center projects in progress in Texas.
Well, there it is, man. So we see what that is. Let's look like we did something, knowing that these things are all the way dodown the road. So there'll be a lot of grandfathering, I'm assuming.
The key thing to me is, okay, that's great for 2027. We got to get in front of these other issues now before you get, because again, you're talking. The research I've read, and a lot of this is from differing sources, but you have as little as 300,000 gallons of water a day up to 10 to 15 million gallons of water a day usage from these data centers. And those are assuming kind of your standard type water systems or water usage systems. So such a broad gamut of how much water can be wasted. Now, in Texas, again, there's a report that just came out from the Water Commission demonstrating how much the aquifer has been drained and how drastically it's been reduced over the last 15 years. So I don't know if that combined with the political pushback has spurred Governor Abbott, but again, very encouraging to see some type of legislation introduced. I don't think it's enough yet. And it's got we need legislation for 2026 now, not 2027.
Yeah. It's interesting too. As I was thinking through this, all types of ideas came in my mind. I'm still a businessman, right? And my business mind kicks in, but at the same time, good business. So it makes me, you're talking around closed loop systems and, draining the aquifer and things like that. Makes me wonder how much time and energy could be put towards R&D and alternative solutions, whether that's alternative cooling solutions. I
That's
think about how China just turned on their first underwater data center. I mean, of course, they're close to the sea, but, I just wonder if there's alternatives that could be, ways of attacking this challenge of, hey, AI is not going away, but we've got to be conscious of the risk reward. If there's other ways to start looking at attacking that problem, from a research and development standpoint, maybe looking at
for sure.
out in the world, or how other industries or what other technology could be pulled in to look at alternatives, not just
Agreed.
you're talking regulations, and that is a great thing. That's where you have to start, or the almighty dollar will always win if not. But
That's right. And I guess that's where you mentioned the businessman focus. So we've worked in cybersecurity for some time, right, before delving into the AI focus areas. Has anyone in your experience, well, I don't want to say ever, most organizations, until there's a regulatory requirement, will absolutely ignore these types of things, right? They're going to say, how am I going to do it cheaper? How do I get it to market quickly? And then, of course, how do I make the most money? Because that's what businesses do, is optimize money.
that's right, man. I think you just defined the issue that we have with AI right there. People are thinking that's what AI is going to do. Make my business run cheaper, faster. And for the greater good. And I think that's the challenge that we're sort of calling out here, right? Is hey, is this really true, or are we sort of going down paths that we shouldn't be? Yeah. Sorry, I know I got off track there, but
Oh, that's right on.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think the business aspect does result in all these negative side effects. It's what drives it, right? Like it just seems so common sense to say, "Yep, we're going to use a closed loop cooling system," unless you don't have to, and unless you're looking at, okay, that's a $2 million add-on cost. They're going to say, "Nah, I'm not doing that."
Nope.
But from outside, you're like, "How could you not do that? Like, look at all the impact to everyone else besides just you."
Right. Right. You would think. I think about like. How I forget the movie, but their pharmaceutical companies, as they're doing their research and development in developing a new drug, will bake in the scenario where the long-term effects of the drug result in a lawsuit. And what's the term when you have a bunch of people come together for a class action lawsuit? They actually bake in the risk management factor, the cost to the big pharma company of a class action lawsuit. They bake that into the price point, so that no matter what, they win out. Even if we know that there's going to be a class action lawsuit, because we're fully aware of that
That's
this
fine.
drug's going to have this problem, and
Yeah.
we know that the settlement will be X amount of dollars, but as long as we bake that into our costs and our bottom line, it's just business as usual. So you
It
think about
reminds me of
that
the old, was it the Ford Pinto that they had, like, it would catch on fire when it got
the
rear-ended or something?
firewall. That's right, man.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, and like they found the meeting minutes from Ford where they're like, "Oh, we can afford
This many.
10,000 deaths or something and not
There
change
you
our
go.
production."
There you go, man. That's
Yeah,
that's what you're
yeah.
fighting against, man. And
Always the trade-off, yeah. And it's
yeah,
crazy that they're like, that's the trade-off. Often business, it's numbers. It doesn't have, they're not seeing like visible human impact. They're seeing dollars on a spreadsheet.
and I think that, and I'm gonna say it again. I'm gonna double down.
Yeah,
That's what concerns me when you have, like you brought up earlier, the government has kind of laid out loose guidelines. But on the same,
yeah,
but what we've seen also is that government has lined themselves with a few big companies, right, that are
yeah.
driving this progression of AI. All the data centers are, we need this, these big companies need this data to be able to improve their language models, or things like that. So it's a little bit alarming, because at the end of the day, are we really thinking about the fallout from what we're doing, or is it being driven by big corporations who have bottom lines to make? You know what I mean? I think that underlines what we're saying with accountable intelligence in general. Like,
Yeah,
hey, public, let's think about this. Let's
for
look
sure.
at these things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of philosophical differences with the idea of AI and how far it should go, right? Should should humans should human work in its entirety be replaced? That's a much higher level philosophical question. So we can't get down into that too far. But I do think quickly you kind of have to start considering those types of things, essentially weapons, right? You have things that are quickly becoming weapons. Claude just yesterday, I believe, released to the public a more safe, supposedly, mythos, right? Was it called Fable? They changed the names around, got me confused there. But so they just released this version called Fable, and that is supposed to be a safer version, but they have this like immediate reversion or something where if you try to ask it to create, I think in the instructions it says if you try to ask it to create a bioweapon, like the instructions for creating a bioweapon, it'll revert you to an old model that doesn't have that capability. This is the kind of stuff we're talking about, right? This is crazy.
That is crazy.
I think philosophically you have to say, okay, who should have these types of things? And going back to your earlier question, we're talking about businesses now, a small number of businesses that have this immense power in their hands without any regulatory authority currently. We just talked about the first rules are being introduced. And now what we're saying is, okay, should people have nuclear weapons? Well, it'd be great if no one did. But some people have them, which means that some other people have to have them. But certainly no one would argue that every kid on the street corner should have a nuclear weapon. We shouldn't be crowdsourcing nuclear weapons. So there's a big push and pull here where you have to say we can't contain all this power and just give it to these 4 organizations or 5 organizations, but at the same time we can't give it to these bad guys and we can't give it to everyone. So it's just a lot of competing interests, and there aren't a lot of answers that make everyone happy. But I think it has to be transparent and it has to be in the best interest of society.
Yeah. Even when you say society, that's tough, man. Because if I put my Team USA hat on, right, my argument there is, well, is China going to stop? And I'm just saying China. Yeah, but that's the tough part there, man. So man. But you summarized that the right way. Like okay, we realize that this is not a perfect thing, but we do have to think realistically, like you said. You can't just use the nuclear bomb as the analogy there. You can't just allow everybody to play with the same tools or have the same weapons and things like that. You certainly don't want, the average person to have that. So that's where we dive in, man, is, we're looking at this from the common person and dealing with the constructs of geopolitics and things like that as well. Yeah.
And I think using that same analogy, we hope that our government would only leverage nuclear weapons for the benefit of our society, and even then, only in the most extenuating circumstances, right?
Right.
And the contrast with AI is, what are we being told? You got to have it everywhere. You got to have it in your toothbrush, right? It just doesn't make any sense. So I think that's that framing of like, where are the places AI needs put in a box and not advanced, not messed with, and kept to classified implementations versus these other things. And I think, and we jump back to the regulation piece. So the White House it also announced some regulation on AI, and again, somewhat jokingly, they have to voluntarily submit their models to the government's, I think it's like KZ, and I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's a Treasury office that's been testing AI since prior to the Biden administration, I believe. So for a good while. But it's incumbent upon these model developers, if they feel like it, because voluntarily, to submit 30 days before release of a model to these agencies. And this is something that stood out to me in that press release, was models are going so fast, the government pushed for 90 days, and this is the excuse the model developers gave. Well, that's going to put us behind China if we wait 60 more days
to
release these models.
There you go, man.
Crazy.
And I mean, I think that's a fair thing, man. I mean, depending on what hat you're putting on, you just think about, I get it. That is such a weird space, man. Weird space.
And I still think that, because I think in this case, they're saying releasing models to the public. And to me, I feel like you have to go a step further and say, you're gonna have to have, because we know the government, they're not gonna do anything in 30 days. What are they gonna do? Like start it up, run 3 queries, and shut it down? Like the government's so inefficient that they're not gonna be able to do very effective testing in 30 days. First of all,
I don't think they're gonna do any testing. Like I don't think in 90 days. I mean, who's doing that testing?
That's right. Yeah. What all does the testing include? Because Mythos got essentially released before they figured out, oh, we can't release that. So if that was tested prior, that was a failure. But I also think that it does bring up the point, what should we have, like a military and or classified grade track that runs separately from the public release track? And how do we regulate public release tracks in a better way? Because I think that's where we have to go. And this is really starting to sound like, remember that documentary that I think episode 1 or 2, we started talking about? This is really starting to sound a lot like that, because they start having to shield in and say, okay, we can't tell the public how good this model is because it creates mass panic, mass confusion, and people start protesting in the streets. So we're kind of living out that, and we're ahead of schedule, by the way, also on that. So
Yeah. Another thing, going back to the whole weapon analogy,
yeah,
the challenge there is, let's say we did want to have a government track versus a non-government, less volatile, less dangerous track. How do you even enforce that? A weapon, if somebody's out in the middle of nowhere testing stuff and it goes boom, I can track that. But how do you?
yep.
Yeah, like, how do you keep the 15-year-old who used to just be a hacker from doing what he's doing? I mean, I guess you could say there's limited capability based on compute. I mean,
Yep.
it's a weird space, like do you limit
Yeah.
compute? And
Yeah, and even the
yeah,
treaties. There's no treaty that says you can't build an AI weapon. There's no framework like there are for the nuclear weapons to say, okay, you can take your AI capability this far. I think that we've probably lost an opportunity because cyber weapons have been around for some time. We've heard a lot about pre-positioning and things that China has in place in our infrastructure to turn off the power grid, et cetera. And those have never been addressed really in a treaty framework well. So now we're in the AI era, and we don't have any legal way of saying like what you did violated this treaty or violated these laws. So now we're still struggling with that, which means that there's no real way cross country boundaries to say China, you shouldn't do this according to this treaty. Would they even pay attention? Probably not. But still, there's nothing there to address it.
yeah, that's true, man. And again, I think the real reason why is because you're crossing the boundaries of commerce and in business.
Yeah,
That's the challenge, right?
you're right.
The government is our government, and is the few big guys are doing a lot of business with our government present day. Yeah, and those are international businesses. So how do you how with some real teeth behind it can you get those people to, because they would have to be the ones that would lead these charges, right? I mean, I would think so.
Yeah,
If you
they
had
would
a
have
chief,
to. Yeah,
yeah, maybe not on the surface or what's said to the public, but behind closed doors, they'd have to be buying into whatever agreements that or driving whatever agreements that we're putting in place. It goes back to one of our original episodes when we were laughing at Elon Musk saying that humans won't have to work in the future. It's like it's hard to take that from the guy who's looking at being the first trillionaire and just say, well, let's just trust that that guy is going to want to make it so that humans don't have to work. It's a hard dynamic to
yeah.
wrap your mind
The
around.
easy question is, okay, how much of the billions are they giving away right now to make sure
There
that
you
people don't
go.
have to work, right?
There you go, man. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I always like
Without
that saying about like, yeah, yeah. There's a good saying about money does not make you a bad person. It just highlights your existing features.
really.
So from a framework perspective, you talking through this made me aware of something. At least right now, the only lever that people have, democratic people like you and I, is the local level to slow down these data centers, because that is really how they're going to be able to differentiate themselves from existing models, one, and secondly, build out new capabilities is through enhanced power. And once they've consolidated, because we're kind of at a critical juncture here. Companies don't know how to use, and I'll borrow the Carnegie Mellon term. They don't know how to operationalize AI. Carnegie Mellon just came out this past week or the week before with an AI adoption maturity roadmap to say, here's how you should adopt AI and operationalize it to enhance your business's effectiveness. Well, right now, companies still don't know how to do that. Once they figure that out, once they say, okay, I can take 10,000 tokens, just throwing out an arbitrary number, and I can replace 7 workers, that's when suddenly, what's your negotiating chip? So right now, as a common human, your power is in slowing down data centers and forcing the battle at the electrical and consumption level. That's really the only level we've got until you get enough of a groundswell politically to say we've got to have taxes on these types of things. We've got to have a clear plan for how they're going to be accountable to us, the taxpayers, on how this is going to be used and which jobs are going to be impacted.
That's right. That's right. I saw something. You brought up something else, man. I have this here. I was trying to pull it up, but DeepMind. It was an article where it said DeepMind economist warns about AI layoff cascade. So in basically in the article, the economist was saying that he doesn't see evidence of a broad white collar AI job bloodbath yet. But what he was warning is that there could be a possible cascade effect. Companies may lay off people because they fear looking behind on AI, not because the AI
Yeah,
actually makes the cuts necessary. Kind of a nuanced point, but it keeps you, that's a nuanced point, but, I just don't want to make it sound like I'm being anti-AI, but, in this case, it's AI panic shaping executive behavior. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people govern or run their organizations following the Wall Street Journal, right? Like, what did the Wall Street Journal say is happening? I better
that's
go
right.
do that because clearly everyone else is doing it.
That's right, man. So, so the question I'd say is AI replacing people because it actually works, or companies replacing people because they're afraid Wall Street thinks that they're
That's right.
not AI first enough, you know?
Yep. And right now, I think you're spot on. They're like it is a latter. They're just saying, "Oh, we're worried. We think we need to be more efficient because this is coming." But none of the data shows that companies are being more effective yet with AI. It's just not there. They're all
Right.
investing in the future. Sure, maybe it's there. And again, I think this is the crucial juncture where the local activism is actually going to have value because once they get the data centers that they need, and once folks figure out that they're fully operationalizing this AI inside these organizations, that's when the cuts are easier to make, and you have no negotiating power. Didn't stop them
Yeah.
at the electricity. They've got the electricity they need. So now, what are you going to argue? Maybe politically.
Yeah. It's interesting, Lucas. It makes me think like how do you energize people to correlate these things and get
That's
going
right.
before it happens, man. That's the key, man.
That's why we're here, right?
Yep.
What are the levers we can pull? The exciting thing is it is somewhat local, right? I'm in a county in central East Texas, and one of the issues I've heard raised by local officials, and rightfully so, is that if they don't build it here, they're going to build it somewhere else. Well, if you can get some type of regional organization where they say they can't go to Robertson County, they can't go to Brazos County, they can't go to Limestone County. These are counties around us, right? So if you regionally agree that you're not going to do this, commissioner to commissioner, county official to county official, then you can raise the stakes and negotiate at a regional level where you might say, okay, you can build it here, but we're going to get all these concessions, maybe additional taxes, jobs, training. That's the kind of thing in the beginning you've got to have some type of organization for, because later on you're going to get nothing.
Right. Right. Makes
If
sense,
and
man.
of course that assumes if you're able to let. I mean, the first goal would be don't build here. Second is let's negotiate so we get a deal that actually benefits the communities.
That's right, man. My mind's going back to the videos of all the students booing the speaker, the commencement speakers whenever they
That's
bring up
right.
AI, right? We know the young generation, they will get behind the cause, man. Maybe that's where we start, man.
Yeah, I think that's got to be where it's at. I think if four more years of pure data center building, and I'll say unregulated data center building, I think it would be too late to negotiate. I think at
That's right.
that point there would be enough compute power that there would be nothing you can do at a local, maybe even regional level to slow these people down.
Yep. Good point.
And I say
Yeah.
that, and so SpaceX, they're launching a facility in Grimes County, which is southwest of me. Yeah, southwest of me. And they just got granted a tax abatement, and they call them investment zones. So that's the cool way of saying them, right? So that's like a $120 billion site southwest, and residents did do a good job of organizing there. They packed the house, had a lot of opposition, but again, the officials, their position was they are going to build it near us. Maybe not in this county, but so we wanted to take advantage of that and try to bring benefits. The problem, again, going back to the studies, is there's no clear benefit to local communities once a data center is constructed. There's like just power draw, bigger power prices, and there's really no job correlation.
Yeah. Interesting, man. So another thing I'm thinking about there, when you were talking about local versus regional organization to sort of push things, that's another thing to think about. Will AI governance require a federal level? Should Washington set one national rule book? Is that even enforceable across all the different sectors? I think that's something to think about if you want to put some teeth behind it. Is it going to be a state thing? Can you reasonably rely on states to regulate themselves in AI and hiring in schools and policing, consumer
Yeah,
protection, deep fakes, or should it come from down from Washington?
it's a good point. It's interesting you mentioned that because this week, California Republican and a Democrat from Massachusetts introduced some legislation to really provide some similar frameworks. And one of the things that they've gotten a lot of pushback on, and I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, so I'll try not to give too much of an opinion, but is that they were really trying to say top down federal rules, and essentially they're going to require federal regulation and they're going to override state regulation. The problem there is that when states want to be more rigorous, then you've tied their hands, right? They can't do anything about it. So that's something. And I haven't read through the whole bill. It's like 250 pages or something. But I think that's really the next question: is where is the best place to regulate this? And I think organically is the best place now. Like if you want a data center in your backyard, go get it. You know what I mean? The people who don't want it are going to push for it. But after that, like I feel like regionally is the only way you're going to have any negotiating power. Because if the county over gets 60 billion, then you're going to lose out. But if you both are able to push up and say, let's get 120 billion and split it between 3 counties, then you've made the deal better for everybody.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe from the national level, and I'm just throwing this out, man. 5-second math. Maybe the regulations need to be at least. State must adhere to at least these minimum, and then that way it gives states carte blanche to add on.
And it's already costing them more because originally it was just, hey, we're gonna reduce your taxes with nothing in return, and now you're seeing like in this SpaceX deal in Grimes County, now they're getting like 10 or 20 million up front and then like 30 million a year after that to the county paid, which is better than, like, that's not the goal, but at least you're negotiating for something versus nothing.